So I hear a lot on YouTube from all kinds of people that they hate gear videos. They hate making gear videos. Gear videos suck. People are constantly annoyed that gear videos get more views than other kinds of videos. And I'm here to say that I really like gear videos. I mean, I watch camera reviews of cameras that I already own just because I like seeing how other people use cameras and I like learning about gear, things I didn't know about it. I like using gear. It's a part of the process for me. It's a part of the enjoyment for me. And I really don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of people relate to that. I think that's why people like watching gear videos. Gear isn't everything. I mean, it's important, but obviously skill and knowledge and experience is also really important, and actually capturing moments, capturing emotion is really important. And I think we all sort of understand that as photographers and video makers, and gear might be more important for some of us than for others. But in any case, I think it's okay to talk about it. Hi everybody, for those of you who are new here, my name is Zach. I'm a photographer and arts administrator based in Santa Barbara, California. And here's another gear video for you because I like talking about gear. So over the past year, my kit and my work has changed quite a bit. So I just wanted to make this video to update you on some of the recent changes to my equipment in case you are interested or curious. And I'm going to tell you about which pieces of my gear are good for beginners, which aren't, in case you're curious about buying any of this stuff or using any of this stuff. I just want to give you my experience. Now, please know that I am biased. I usually start my gear videos by saying this because I think it's really important when people like me are on the internet talking about really expensive gear, for you as a viewer, as someone who might be buying this gear, to know that I am biased. But let's not dwell on that. Let's jump in and talk about gear. So specifically today, we're talking about the camera equipment that I use, both camera bodies and lenses. And we're talking only digital today. I do use some film cameras, but we're talking about digital because it's the primary focus of my work. So right off the bat, we have to talk about the EOS R6. This is my workhorse camera, my primary camera. I use it for 90% of my work. I have loads of content on this camera on my channel, so if you're curious, definitely check it out. It's my favorite camera I've ever used. It's the camera I use for portraiture, for events. It's the camera that my team and I use when we film weddings. I'm an associate videographer for a wedding video team, and we all shoot on the R6. It creates an absolutely beautiful image, and it's just a dream to work with. It has amazing customizability. I can't say enough good things about this camera, and basically it's a camera that has ruined all other cameras for me. And I'm probably being a little bit dramatic, but I like this camera a lot. Is it a good camera for beginners? I would say yes. It's a great camera for beginners. It's a great camera for pros. So if you are someone who is looking for your first professional camera and you've decided that you want to pursue photography or videography down the road, you want to invest in a good quality camera that will be a good camera to learn on as well as take you into the future of your business, this is a great camera for that. If you really don't know much about photography and if it's going to be something that you actually stick with, this might be a little bit much of an investment for you because it's kind of an expensive camera. It's definitely worth it, but it does require a little bit bigger of an investment. So I would say it's a good first professional camera if you know that you want to invest in your photography career and you have the funds to afford it. Now, one thing that I have to mention is that the overheating when shooting 4K video is a problem. It has been a problem for me when shooting weddings. You can get around it most of the time, but it's an issue, and it's a really big bummer because this camera is almost perfect, and if it weren't for the overheating, it would really have no major issues. So just know that overheating is a thing, unfortunately. Next, we're going to talk about the EOS R. So this is the very first mirrorless camera from Canon, my first mirrorless camera. Absolutely love this camera. I used it almost exclusively for about a year of shooting and just loved it. The sensor is beautiful. The ergonomics are great. The build is great. It's just a really fun camera to use. Some things that I don't love about the camera are the 1080 video. I just think it doesn't look very good. It does take very good 4K video. A couple of the buttons I don't really love so much. I wish it had a command dial on the back of the camera instead of a D-pad. This is kind of frustrating because I usually use that dial for aperture, but I've sort of gotten around that by using the EF to RF control ring adapter. So the control ring sort of functions as the aperture ring when I'm using the R. If I'm using an RF lens, Again, the control ring on the lens itself functions as the aperture control. And then I can map ISO to the back dial and shutter speed to the front dial. And that way I have all three components of the exposure triangle mapped to a different ring on the camera, which is really nice. I also don't love that this camera only has one card slot. It's kind of a bummer, but I never had any issues with that. So just something to know. I think this is also a really great option for someone who's just getting into the mirrorless game or someone who's new to photography. It's a really great camera. It has absolutely beautiful image quality and amazing 4K video. It's really easy to use. It also has a pretty good price point, I would say. If the R is a little bit too pricey for you, I would look at the RP. People say that they really love that camera. And although I've never used it, it seems like it has a lot to offer at a really good price. So R and RP are both good options. I've heard complaints about the EOS R's color science, that the images look a little bit green when they come out of the camera, but I've never actually experienced that problem when using this camera, so it hasn't been an issue for me. All in all, really great solid camera that sort of functions as my secondary photography camera, my third video camera if I need it, and also just like an all-around backup camera in case something happens to my R6. Finally, we have the EOS C70, which is a cinema camera. So it's a video camera specifically that I use for my bigger video work. I invested in the C70 when the video side of my business really took off during the pandemic. I use it to record long form content like symphony concerts and operas, since I do a lot of work with local performing arts organizations. So the C70 has been crucial to accomplishing those types of jobs. I would say though, it's not a camera I use all the time. I think it is something that's going to become more valuable to me in the future as my video business grows. For the most part, I shoot the majority of the video. If I didn't need to record long form content, I think I could get by with just the R6. And I know there are workarounds like using external recorders and things like that, but I really just wasn't interested in diving into all of that and having to build out my camera all the time. I just wanted a dedicated cinema camera that I could use for bigger jobs, which I've enjoyed having, but would like to get more use out of it in the future. So that wraps it up for my digital cameras. Now, the really cool thing about these three cameras is they all use the same lens mount. So they all feature the RF lens mount, and they all take an EF to RF adapter, so they can use RF and EF lenses. This really streamlines my kit so that I know that I can use any of my lenses with any of my cameras, which is really, really amazing. And that's something that I really love about the gear that I currently have. So speaking of lenses, let's dive in to my lens lineup. So we'll go in order of focal length, starting with my widest lens, which is the EF 24mm L 1.4. I'm shooting this video right now on that lens. It was the second professional lens from Canon that I ever bought. It's really great for environmental portraiture. I have a video on this if you're curious. I use it primarily now for video work. It's the lens I use most often on my C70 with the EF to RF speed booster that Canon makes. It's just a really great lens. It's very sharp, has a nice separation with that shallow aperture, lets in a lot of light, it has a good build to it, a good heft. I just like the look of this lens all around. It's a really great lens for video and even for portraits if you're looking for a wider field of view. Next is the Canon RF 35 1.8. This is an incredible option if you shoot with the R cameras. It's really lightweight, really small and portable. It makes for an incredibly portable combination that you can really take with you anywhere. This sort of changed the game for me with my R6 because with the 35mm, it becomes a combination that I just love to have with me all the time, which is really awesome. The 35 is relatively affordable. It is sharp, it's fast, great for video and stills. It's just an all-around great little lens to have in your bag if you have an R camera. Next is the 45mm tilt shift. So I watch Eric Floberg's channel. You can deduce why I have this tilt shift lens if you also watch Eric Floberg. It's a great creative lens, good for couples, good for portraits. I really actually like the look of this lens a lot. It's a fully manual lens. You can get that really interesting creative look that comes with a tilt shift lens. So I don't use this lens very much, but it's fun to use on occasion. Next is my favorite lens of all time. It's the 50mm EF 1.2L from Canon. This was my first professional prime lens from Canon, and it was the only lens I used with my 5D Mark IV at the beginning of my photography career. It is an incredible lens. It has a wonderful build quality. It's weather sealed, has a nice heft to it, nice size and weight, and the image quality is amazing. It creates really, really beautiful portraits. The compression is great. It's a really good focal length. I think it's very versatile for everything from landscapes to portraits. Being a 1.2 lens, it lets in a ton of light and creates beautiful out of focus area. This lens lens also has an incredible lens flare. It's just a dream lens. It's a really amazing. I compared it with the 50mm RF 1.2 and found that I just love the EF even more after using it against the RF. The RF lens is an incredible 50mm lens in its own right, but there's just something really special about the 50mm EF lens. So it's a lens that I will continue to bring with me on every portrait, every couple shoot. I just love this lens. So next is the 135 f2. This is also an L lens, but it's a little bit older. It's not weather sealed. It's kind of long. And so on the adapter, using it on an R camera is a little bit uncomfortable, just the way that the lens is. It just is quite long. I love the look of this lens. It has beautiful compression. Being an f2 lens, it lets in a lot of light and creates really beautiful out of focus area. It has a dreamy, dreamy look to it. But as much as I love prime lenses, this one is very limiting, just considering the focal length. You have to have a really specific reason to use this lens before you put it on your camera. I've used it at weddings and I absolutely love the result, but it's limited by that fixed focal length in my opinion. And also this lens hunts quite a bit. The autofocus struggles even on the R cameras. So for that reason, I don't use this lens that often, and I am actually selling it because of the next lens I'm going to talk about, which has sort of replaced it for me. So the newest addition to my lens lineup is the Canon RF 70-200 2.8. So if you watch my most recent video, you would have seen a test of this lens. I absolutely fell in love with this lens. I've wanted a 70-200 lens for a long time, but I've always hated using them. Since I shoot a lot of stages and events, this lens is a perfect lens for me, but I just have always hated using them. So I've gotten by in my career until now using primes and renting 70-200s or other zoom lenses when I needed them for specific jobs. But after using the RF lens, I just couldn't give it back. Like I just needed it because it's so useful for what I do. And the RF lens in particular has an absolutely beautiful look to it. It's incredibly sharp, incredibly fast to focus. The image stabilization is amazing when paired with the R6. It's just incredible. You can shoot amazing video with this handheld. It's going to be a huge game changer for me. So this lens sort of takes the place of any longer focal length lenses like an 85 or the 135. This lens covers all of those longer focal lengths for me, and I'm already getting a lot of use out of this lens. The other thing I love about this particular 70-200 lens is it's not as massive as some of the other ones. It's still quite a hefty lens. It's the biggest lens I own for sure, but the size is definitely manageable. The size is not going to give you any issue as far as taking it with you on any job. Sure, it's probably not going to be the lens that you take out for fun. It's not going to be the lens you take to the streets. It's not going to be the lens that you travel with, most likely, but the size is very manageable. And for me, that was a huge, huge reason why I was interested in this lens to begin with. So before we leave it, I want to give you a little tip for some other pieces of gear that always come with me in my camera bag. So aside from like extra batteries and extra memory cards, I always bring a couple of filters. And the filters that I use are a 2 to 5 stop ND filter. So the version I have is the Peter McKinnon Polar Pro version, right? It's very expensive, but it's nice, gets the job done. 2 to 5 stop ND filter, right? So it's variable. This allows me to get that really gorgeous blur effect when I'm shooting with couples or when I'm shooting portraits, just to add a little bit of motion into the frame, a little bit of interest. It's become a favorite way of shooting for me. So the filter I have is 77mm, so it fits on my 24. It fits on my 70-200. I also have a step-up ring, which is just a little ring that allows it to also fit on a smaller filter thread. So the step-up ring I have is 72-77, so it can fit on my 50 as well. And then I have a 1/4 black Pro Mist filter from Tiffin. So these are like all the rage these days, but I've really, really enjoyed this little filter. It creates an absolutely gorgeous look, and I actually really love it on the 70-200. I think it's just a really interesting look, sort of makes everything a lot more dreamy, really creates a beautiful glow with any light and backlight and things like that. So this lens I also have in a 77mm filter thread, and again, it can go on the step-up ring in order to fit on my 50mm if I need it to. And those are really the only two filters that I bring, and I use them all the time to create more interesting, diverse work. It's a super simple hack to really up your game and make more creative images. So before we leave it, I have to address sort of maybe an elephant in the room. If you're familiar with the channel, you know this channel got started basically from me talking about my X Pro 3 and my love for that camera. And I have to confess something to you. I actually sold my X Pro 3 and my Fujifilm kit. I sold it. Thank you, Blake. I know you're giving that camera life. But I have to tell you why. I feel like I'm confessing my sins to you right now. I still love Fujifilm. I still love the X Pro 3. But what I realized is that for the past several months, it's just been sitting on my desk, not getting much use, because I basically just turn to the R6 for everything now. It's become the camera that I just want to take with me for everything, for my professional work as well as my personal work. It really changed the game for me as far as my work and my interests. It's just the camera that I want to use more often than anything else. It's the look of the images that come out of it, the look of the video that comes out of it is what I want my work to look like, and using it is how I want to use a camera. And as much as I love the X Pro 3 and I love Fujifilm in general, I just wasn't using the camera system as much. And after they released a couple of new lenses, I realized that I just wasn't in a place to continue investing in a separate interchangeable lens camera system. And so in the interest of moving forward in the RF lineup and sort of consolidating some of my gear, I decided to sell that kit because I just felt like it was taking up space and wasn't being used. And I don't really want to just collect camera gear. I want the camera gear I own to be camera gear that I actually use on a regular basis. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about consolidating my kit and tailoring it for the work that I'm doing. Now, that being said, I do eventually want to get back into Fujifilm, but I think it will be with the X100 series. So hopefully in the future, I'll get myself an X100V or something from the X100 line, because I feel like not having a Fujifilm camera is a big bummer, and I really want to have one just for me. And so I feel like the X100 would be a simple way to get into the Fujifilm system again with a camera that takes up a really small footprint and is actually a camera that I absolutely adore. So I do have plans to get back into Fujifilm, and I definitely have plans to continue talking about their cameras and reviewing them and recommending them because I think they are fantastic. But I just realized that I don't want to have a bunch of gear that I'm not using. Maybe I'll regret that decision. Let me know in the comments. I don't want anyone to be disappointed by this. I still think that they're incredible cameras. I would still recommend them, and I still understand the appeal. So I hope you understand just where I'm coming from and where I'm moving with my decisions about my gear, and that they will still have a place on the channel moving forward. So that's about it for my camera lineup. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something. I hope you found it useful. If you have questions for me, please leave them down in the comments. I would really like to hear from you. I really want to know what your thoughts are. I'm very curious after making this video to hear what you think. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I'd love to see you at the next video. Thank you as always for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.